Hi everybody. I just tried to go live and I had some trouble, so we'll try this again. Anyway, see, I'm getting a message that says that I'm blocked. I don't know if you can still see me or not. I'm gonna just try to keep going. My name is Julianne Romanillo. I'm in Tulsa, Oklahoma, and I haven't done a Facebook Live in a while, so I'm getting my sea legs here. Today I wanted to do a little talk in defense of, in parentheses, criminal governments. Really, it's just a sort of catchy title, and or catchy to me when I'm tired. It's 10:37, and what is today? It's August 25th. I always tell myself I'm going to write that down. Okay. So I thought it was a catchy title to provoke interest and also to acknowledge a major problem that we have today, and that is that our governments, the governments of all of the world's nations, are engaged in criminal activities against the people that they're supposed to protect. Nevertheless, I want to argue that those governments need to be defended. Not the governments, actually, I should say the constitutional orders or the traditional order that supports the government that is currently in place. Those need to be defended against an effort that seeks to fundamentally transform them out of existence in order to establish an even more dangerous system in their stead. Since it is late, I'm going to maybe read some of this rather than just talk through it. But my point is that we have to work within the system, the legal and constitutional system that we have, I believe, rather than falling into some of the other narratives about doing away with government altogether and trying to move to a sort of natural law, anarchist model, or trying to just automate government and go along with the new normal. And the argument for automated government is that you get the bias out, you do what works, you see results, it's pragmatic, it's, free of all of the deficiencies that human beings have that make government so messy. And that can be very appealing, especially after what we've been through the last 2.5 years. So I want to argue against that. Let's say one is the new normal view, and that is the idea that we're just going to automate government and transform it digitally so that you interact with apps and screens and virtual telepresencing machines rather than human beings in person. And then there's the new possible route, and that is that's coming from the sort of green movement that wants to do away with power relations altogether and look to the goodness of people and their capacity to solve their conflicts more or less peacefully if they have enough resources to provide for their basic needs and they don't have to fight over those. Okay, so there are two sort of schools that are arguing that we need to rethink the value of the old social contract and replace it with some sort of new social contract. And I want to argue against that and say that, at least in the United States where I am, but I would say probably in most Western nations, the constitutional orders that we have do provide protections for the people. They give us a shared vocabulary of rights and individual liberties that are very important as we move into this new world order. And just because the practice has broken down, and I'm going to explain how that has broken down, doesn't mean that we need to throw the baby out with the bathwater, so to speak. So So like I said, I'll just sort of read through this to try to keep myself from getting distracted. Okay, so what is happening with our current governments? I have a couple of things here. This is just summaries, general. There are always qualifications that can be made. But in general, our governments have been slowly and methodically transformed by an adept and secretive and highly organized group of persons who would like to impose a global system of physical, intellectual, and psychic or spiritual slavery. Sounds nice, right? It has progressed via, I can't read my own writing, via appeals to a scientific and economic model of progress. And I guess you could really just say that the governments of the world right now are under the control of cartels or organized crime rings. And they don't intend for our good. Okay? So that's one thing that's happening. It has to do with the problem. And let me mention how we got there. Just again, a summary of the process. Okay, it's happened through sophisticated judicial rulings, the creation of thick and expansive regulatory regimes, and the rise of the administrative state. So we're making rules and regulations through bureaucratic agencies that are not close to the people and able to be checked by the people. And there is also, and this is very important, I think, a strategy of developing leadership networks and placing initiates of those leadership networks into offices that influence public policy. So it's crony government, and we see that there's crony capitalism going on, and right now those two are melding. Fourth consideration, how we've gotten to government by cartels, is that there is a sophisticated media and marketing strategy that has fixed the terms of description and debate, not only in individual countries, but also internationally. What's the goal of the cartel government? The end game of the criminal cartels is centralized control over the world's diverse populations. They want to do this through a globally networked digital operating system that optimizes people's behavior, or it does so automatically through social credit ratings, access controls, and supply chain management. The optimization roughly coincides with the Sustainable Development Agenda, and that agenda aims to measure and manage all human activities. It's really a bit about power. It's a power grab. I'm sorry, I'm having trouble reading my own writing. Okay, so given the fact that we're governed by cartels, and the process of arriving at this point has been very well executed by our antagonists, and it's gone virtually unseen by us, and it's been, for that reason, very successful. Why should we not just throw out government altogether? Why should we just say the cartels have chosen to operate through government, so the best way to get them out is to throw out the structure that they have used? What I want to argue is that, some of the anti-government positions rest on sort of faulty reasoning, and they want to say that governments, or they sort of look at governments as a sole source of power, and especially oppressive power. And let's see. And I want to say, basically, that governments are not the only potentates that we have to watch out for. We need to watch out for corporations, for technology companies, and just the technology itself, and also devils, demons, Satanists, real evil forces. Okay, so those things are those influences are competing with government for the use of coercive power over the people. And I think that we're going to find out that government itself, like the structure of it, can be a tool that we use against those other contenders for primary oppressive power. Let's see. Action needed. Oh, goodness. Uh-oh. I don't know if this is working. It's telling me it's not working. Okay, I don't know if you guys can still see me or not. What a frustrating thing this has been. Okay, but I'll just keep going. Okay, so if it's about power, why defend government, since they're the main oppressors, seem to be? In other words, why should we scrutinize the anti-government position? This is a really important one, my number 2, and that is that the media campaign against governments and nation states and in favor of decentralized, bottom-up, self-sovereign, and stateless solutions is in and of itself reason to question the stateless solution. So anytime that we're getting a narrative pushed on us, and I think that there's definitely a narrative against states and that is calling into question their legitimacy, it's trying to, and we're hearing over and over again through tools like the Edelman Trust Barometer that governments have lost the public trust because, say, they could not produce a stinger fast enough. So businesses and the private sector have taken over the public trust. That's, in a nutshell, the narrative, and I think it's getting pushed at us from all sides. If you look at current events in the U.S. with the student loan forgiveness program, with the billions and trillions almost of dollars that have been sent to the Ukraine, when you look at the failure to enforce basic rules of order and election validity, all of those events are just being hyped and sensationalized, and they're pounding home the idea that we should not put our trust in that system that is perpetrating these activities. And I think we can guess that there's a new solution waiting in the wings once people really get convinced that the old system has to go. Okay, one of the major effects of the pandemic was to cripple the economy and starve public budgets of their revenues. So that gives an opportunity to reinvent public policy and to establish new partnerships, public-private partnerships, where grant makers and corporations and other entities provide for the loss of revenue that governments have had. Now, anytime that there's a creation of a public-private partnership, you lose public accountability, because private corporations or NGOs are not subject to the same level of scrutiny and public oversight that our public institutions are. Those that are created by law have to answer to the people ultimately. Okay, so all of the media effort is directed at undermining our trust in our constitutional system and in the government that we have, that has evolved through the course of that system. And sorry, excuse me. And when we look at the effects of the pandemic and how it's worked, it's been to cripple government, especially its ability to fund entitlement programs that are the main reason why people like the governments, because, it does provide a basic level of service. So if it can't do that, then why do we even have it, right? And so my number 3 reason why we should be very cautious against any suggestions that we do away with the constitutional system or the government that's evolved as a result of it, through it, is that all of the solutions from both the new normal side and the new possible side, they're all pointing toward blockchain-based digital government, which is absolutely unaccountable to the people, okay? Despite the resetters' claim to equity, democracy, and the like, automated government, I would argue, is worse than criminal government, or a government that happens to be populated by criminals, especially when the automated government is set up by the criminal cartels, that is, the politicians who are in partnership and evil collaboration with corporations and other ideologues who want to control the world's population. Okay, so so what reasons do we have to try to prevent the impending collapse of our constitutional systems? That's sort of going on the last point. We need to think strategically, and anything that the resetters don't want, we should want, and vice versa. If they want to destroy it, we should probably want to keep it. So in the U.S., they want to sort of minimize the role and importance of state governments. So I think that that is a key tool for those of us who don't want to live under tyranny to protect. We need to protect the tool of our states and those state constitutions and the power that comes from a unit of government that is larger than a city, but smaller and therefore more accountable, we hope, to the people. So our challenge is to discern the synthesis that the resetters are aiming at, and then to put a halt to that, or not give them what they want. They have a problem, reaction, solution. We need to sort of discern the solution and then fight against that in as many instances and on as many levels as possible. Okay. Then number 2, the resetters acknowledge the power or obstacle to power that lies in popular opinions about the principles of political order that give rise to the perception that some power or authority is legitimate. Okay, so what I mean by that is that our perceptions about how an authority has legitimate power, it has a legitimate title to rule and to say these things must be done, these things cannot be done, here are penalties, here are processes. The sort of civic myth that we have here in the U.S. and in most Western countries is that the legitimacy of authority to enjoin behavior comes from the source of that authority in the people, right? And, people don't really understand how that works. They're not sure exactly what it means, but there is still this basic level civic myth about the justice of government being based on the consent of the governed, okay? And that, so when we believe that the authority is legitimate because it's based on popular opinion, we can say that probably the converse is true. If we think that that power and authority is not based on the consent of the governed, in the consent of the governed, we're not going to believe it's a legitimate use of power. So our resetters are very savvy in looking at how public perception about legitimacy of institutions needs to be managed. So what they're doing, I think, is they're trying to make a case for the new social compact, or sometimes they call it a contract. They fudge some on if it's a compact or contract. They're trying to make a case that that new social contract emerges naturally out of the old. And that's a progressive view, it's a Hegelian dialectical view, but it is not a true view because the new social contract is entirely new. That's why you have to reset in order to establish that as the governing, paradigm of order, of political order, of legal and judicial order and social order and the rest. Okay, so I think most people still are more inclined to believe in that civic myth that government is only legitimate if it is accountable to the people. More people believe that than not, or at least they have an aspiration to believe that that is true. And so we need to understand how powerful that perception is and see that it can be used to our advantage. Okay. Also, reasons to stay the course with nation states and constitutional systems is that, these systems, the constitutional and traditional systems, do have provisions for protecting popular sovereignty and rights that the new systems absolutely do not have. Okay. Also, our older, or let's say the residual beliefs in those provisions of popular sovereignty and individual rights, even if they were always mythical or aspirational, those residual beliefs combined with the sort of lingering familiarity that we have with those systems. To be sure, not many people have read the Constitution, and the catalogue of legal opinions about the meaning of the Constitution has grown out of control. No one could ever read all of that. I couldn't read all of that. But even despite that growing complexity and institutional thickening, we still know something about the old system. Whereas we have no experience whatsoever with the new technocratic system, and that puts us at a huge advantage to the resetters who know all about it because they've designed it and they've decided that it's time to roll it out. So I think the people have a source of strength in trying to remain in the older framework, in the older social contract, because we know our way around it much better than we know our way around this new technocratic system. And you can just think of it like when you make one of these calls to get service on some product that you have, and you're told to press a number, press this, say something again, I can help you with that, say it again, da, 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 da. And you just learn. You're saying, give me a person, I want to talk to a person, We've all had that frustrating experience, and that's what the new model of governance is going to look like, automated governance. Okay, so just to sort of sum up, the cartels are constrained by the degree to which we believe in and are ready to defend the words and procedures and institutions of the old regime. Okay, that it's a constraint. It's a very powerful constraint. They wouldn't be trying to overcome it so much if it weren't very, very powerful. And then the third reason to sort of stay the course with nation states, this is sort of a spiritual musing, a reflection that I have, and that is to say that either way you look at it, the reset is based on a utopian vision. The new normal is based on a utopian vision. The new possible is based on a utopian vision. One is of technocratic management, and the other is of a sort of stateless community that is based on sort of independent moral governance and, human goodness, and sometimes that goes under the heading of natural law with, sort of sovereign citizens. Okay, but either one of those two, whether it's the Klaus version or the permaculture version, they're both based on a utopian vision about what human beings are capable of. And I think that's the most dangerous trap that we could fall into, is to believe that that a heaven on earth is possible for human beings. So if we are not to fall into that trap, we have to sort of admit to ourselves that we're limited beings, that we don't have all the answers, that human beings are complex, that history and experience bears down on us, so no sort of rational theory can be applied without messiness and mistakes. And most of our older Western liberal, classical liberal orders take into account that limited capacity of human nature to do and to be good. Okay, so, and this is just from my own idea here, is that I just wonder if the practice of defending the governments and the systems, the constitutional systems, that we have sort of carelessly neglected and that now are oppressing us, is in some way an admission of our responsibility in the current crisis. We can't just blame the criminal cartels. We have to look at ourselves and see what we've done or not done that has, paved the way for this terrible situation that we're in. And speaking from my own experience, there are a lot of things I wish I had done differently or known more about, but I didn't, and so now we just have to go forward. But perhaps it's the process of sort of picking up this old thing that we treated badly and saying, I can't really go to the store and get a new thing. I'm going to have to do the hard work of trying to fix this. I think that maybe there's some redemptive suffering that goes along with that. And there's also the freedom of actually reassuming that responsibility that we should have had for a much longer time. I also think it's probably more realistic to work within the current system and sort of, steer people back toward the best aspirations of our old order rather than set up something totally new, especially after people have been really beaten up the past 2.5 years, and much longer than that. So, I guess that's all I will say for now. I have some more thoughts on this that I'm trying to write up, but I just wanted to get this out there, and I had some technical difficulties. Those plagued me a lot. But anyway, I'll try to do another little talk. Maybe, I'll type it and talk about, how the impact economy relies on government to set up the conditions for the total absence of government. Okay, so we're not going to just move directly from where we are right now into a stateless society. There's an intermediate sort of arrangement, and part of that's based on these public-private partnerships, and it's also using the residual power of the government to set up impact investing markets and to really put the money in those, taxpayer money in those, to get them going, so that once the government is done away with, everything's already set up for that machine to keep rolling. So anyway, apologies for the the technical difficulties, but I hope that there are at least a few things that were helpful here, and I will see you guys again soon. Bye bye.